Okay, great. I think I will now call to order the special meeting, Jones LSC, and it is 6:01. Okay, Sarah, do you want to do the roll call? Oh,
I do. I just want to
Okay.
give one more second. Here we go. I just want to make sure that the sound is working.
Okay, I can recall to order if that was not all.
Okay, we're good. Sorry, I wanted to make sure the sound was working.
Great. So at 6:02, I will call our special meeting of the Jones LLC to order, and Sarah will do the first item, which is roll call.
Okay. Andrade?
Here.
Bowman? She's not here. Bugs?
Present.
Berna Prado?
Here.
Cresswell?
Here.
Hillbrands?
Here.
Land? Deborah? Are you there? Can you hear us? I see her. I guess I could chatter. Or is her screen frozen? Oh, there she is. Deborah, are you here?
Maybe her
Okay.
sound must be done.
All right, let me just put this in the, can you just put it in the chat? I see. Deborah, is your sound working? No, someone text her, please. Ma here. Martinsek, not here, right? MacArthur? Benjavar? Roberto?
Present.
Powers?
Here.
Zen?
Here.
All right, just to show, Bowman, Martinsek, and MacArthur are not here. I see Deborah, so I know she's here, but.
Yeah, I think she's gonna log back in.
Okay, let me check this. Okay, great. Okay, make a motion to approve the agenda.
Do we have a second? Great.
Okay, Power second. Roll call. Andrade.
Yes.
Bugs.
Yes.
Still can't hear. Berna Prado.
Yes.
Cresswell.
Yes.
Hillbrands.
Here. Yes.
Sorry. Ma, yes. Martinsek is not here. Menjivar.
I'm sorry, Sarah. That was to approve the agenda, correct?
Yes.
Yay.
Okay. Powers.
Yes.
Zen.
Yes.
Okay. And is Miss Bowman coming tonight? Does anyone know?
She put no on the
Oh, okay.
Google invite. She was like a yes if need be.
Okay.
Deborah, do you want to try the phone? Here's the phone access number. And then you can do sound by phone.
Oh, she says it's working now. Okay.
Great.
Okay. I'm going to make a motion to approve. I'm going to do it as, I think I can do it all as one motion. I think the people that were there, to approve the minutes from the July 8th organizational meeting, the special meeting, and the closed meeting.
Second.
Power second. Excellent. Roll call would be Andrade.
Yes.
Bugs.
Yes.
Serna Prado.
Yes.
Cresswell.
Yes.
Hillbrands.
Yay.
Land.
Yes.
Ma, yes. Menjivar.
Hey, Sarah, just to be fully transparent, I did make a couple edits to one of the minutes. So I just want to make sure everyone is aware of that.
Yeah, he replaced try with true in one section, and just clarified the statement about that he made about basketball. I'm sorry, I'm trying to find the exact comment in here. He just added, after we approved about the check requisitions, and he asked about the boys basketball team request for purchasing team uniforms. When the girls soccer team and cheerleading teams had to raise funds for their respective clubs, and that Dr. Powers would address it with the athletic director and Jones clubs and teams following the Title IX gender equity and requirements. So I think those did actually happen in the meeting. So are you a yes now with those edits?
Yes, but I just wanted to make sure every member on the LSC was aware of those two changes.
Thank you. Sorry, let me find my notes. Powers
Yes.
and Zen.
Yes.
Okay, so those are approved, those minutes. All right.
Okay, next is public participation. I think the only sign up is Raquel Don, and I think I see that you emailed her the link. If she joins later, we can add her and have her speak then. And in lieu of Raquel, let's move on to item 5, the whole school safety plan. So I have it linked to a document, and that is the only document I have. So I'm presuming that that's the most up-to-date document. Is that correct, Mr. Mitchell and Rachel and Daniel?
I believe so. The last draft, I mean, there haven't been any major changes. We just spent some time working on being able to address some of the additional concerns. But as far as massive changes that needed to be made to the plan, there have not been any. There may be a deletion that needs to occur on the plan after this evening, but can kind of talk about that when we get there.
Okay, should we go through it then just by priority or whatever, like we did before? Or do you have a specific list of more detail that you want to?
Well, I mean, I can start with a brief update that would kind of maybe change some folks' opinions about some things, or just give some clarity, and then we can go back item by item, starting with the first priority. First and foremost, met with Jadine last week in regards to the safety plan, and she informed me that we are going to have an additional $30,000 to incorporate in our decision making based upon the equity index. So schools across the district are receiving some different levels of funding, and so we were granted an additional $30,000. So instead of the decision coming out of $100,000, it's now out of $130,000. And also part of our conversation, because I did inquire about the special attention and the request for having that in writing, and we kind of talked about the fact that CPD would not necessarily put anything in writing, but they would still make the request for special attention. But we looked into the idea, or the having the additional security person being able to help mitigate our concerns around arrival and dismissal. And so through our conversation, it became clear that with that additional monies, we could, in essence, afford the additional security person and the SEL person that we were looking for. So, I guess that would be the big kind of reveal or update. And then I can go now kind of priority by priority to speak more in depth to those things. All right, Kaziola, if you have a question.
No, that would be great if you want to just go through that fast.
Okay, priority one is around students connecting with their peers, and the money affixed to this is in regards to the curriculum, the SEL supports. So our recommendation was to purchase some curriculum from Emoja. Well, basically, it's all centered around our partnership with Emoja. So I do actually have an update around that. I'm getting a updated proposal from Emoja later this week, but excuse me, the $5,000 for the curriculum is still accurate, and the $12,000 is still accurate for the coaching supports. Well, I'm sorry, that's not accurate. That's where it may be plus or minus. But the thing is that this would not come out of the $130,000. This would come out of either the ADF funds or would it be, Dr. Powers, again, correct me if I'm wrong, would it be the OST funds? But the point is that 17,000 would come from a different funding. It wouldn't come out of the 130.
It will probably be from the ADF funds rather than the OST.
Okay, so that would come out of the ADF funds. Also on the current plan right now, it is also listed 2,200 for an equity restorative justice workshop. After speaking with Emoja, right now, with the way we have things planned, we have a partnership with Alternatives that really supports some of our efforts as it centers around restorative practices. So I guess the simple way to frame it is we'll do our restorative work with Alternatives and our SEL work with Emoja, a partnership with Emoja. So that makes it easier to understand. Today I met with a representative of Emoja, kind of ironing out how we might provide the professional development that teachers would need, and just some of the initial planning. So that's working very well. But as far as the purpose of the plan, that's where we stand. Still looking at roughly 17,000, but that would be funded out of ADF funds. Any additional questions there? All right.
Sorry, I think Roberto does. Do you want to go ahead, Roberto?
Yes. So the $5,000. Good evening, Mr. Mitchell. The $5,000 SEL curriculum that includes like some sort of professional development where Emoja would come in and walk through the curriculum. So it's not just like a textbook and then we have to figure out, the school has to figure that out. There will be like support services, like
That's what the
human contact.
Yes, that's what the additional 12,000 is for those supports. The curriculum itself, because it's broken down to $1,250 per grade level. So we received some curricular maps that give us some indication of what is available. So everybody will get similar topical information, but different actual lessons. So for example, one of the curricular units may be centered around post-secondary work. And so what post-secondary means for a 9th grader will be very different than post-secondary for an 11th grader. And there are lessons that are provided per grade level for that particular discipline. So we're still vetting it all out, but to answer your question, yes, Mr. Menjivar, it would be covering curriculum and support services. There is an initial onboarding PD, and then there is ongoing support throughout the year.
Oh, that sounds great. And then the equity restorative justice workshop, the 2,200, if I understood
Yes.
you correctly, that's going to be through Alternatives.
Yeah, so we can delete that cost because we don't know if that's going to, well, I don't have a cost for that with Alternatives, especially since we've already been partnering with them and some of that cost has been absorbed through the Office of Social Emotional Learning. Because of the Moving Forward Together initiative with the district, we are being provided a bunch of services that will positively impact our whole school safety plan in the sense that things that we recommended are going to be supported through the district. So it's not going to cost us much of anything.
Okay, and so you don't anticipate that there will be some sort of expense associated with alternatives at this point, or do you want to kind of budget just a range at this point?
I mean, I understand what you're saying and it makes sense, but I wouldn't want to put an arbitrary number that I couldn't back up. So I don't know how you guys want to frame it, but I definitely I understand, you know, what you're suggesting. I figure, you know, for purposes of voting on this plan, that so that we're all on the same page, I would figure let's work with what we have. If we want to note somewhere in the minutes or somewhere as it relates to the plan that and you know, we want to make sure that there is some funding, but because of what where alternatives falls, that also might be money that could come out of the ADF funding as opposed to this 130,000.
Okay, and I think that suggestion, Mr. Mitchell, about just putting some sort of language maybe in this plan that that Jones is going to be coordinating with alternatives to provide the equity restorative justice workshop.
You say that again. You want language that basically alternatives is providing this equity workshop, because what I'm saying to you is it's not determined yet what additional support we'll get from alternatives, but we currently are partnering with them. We have the work that we're doing with our peer conferencing you know, group and continuing that process. So I have not spoken about an additional, you know, like I said, professional development around you know, equity and restorative practices. Not to say that it can't be, but that conversation that has not been had.
Yeah, I guess we can we'll put some sort of language that that the Jones administrative leadership team or you, Mr. Mitchell, are going to explore continuing that partnership with alternatives, and then coming back with an update of whether that's going to be there's going to be an additional cost or something like that. Just some sort of language that's going to be part of this in some capacity, or that you'll be exploring this in some capacity.
Understood. We can put that in there. But if it, you know, will that be a deal breaker with getting past this evening without that language?
I would think that I think technically CPS was like, don't tie your plan to particular vendors. So I think it's probably you know, makes more sense to not mention particular vendors, especially in this case where we're not sure what the cost will be, and like say alternatives didn't work out, we'd probably be happy with the Moja. So I think it's okay.
Okay.
It's better to have more of a description of the function that we want to have done under that priority than necessarily the vendor.
Understood.
Yep, and I agree with Cassie.
Okay, so can we move on to priority 2?
Sarah has another comment or question.
Yeah, no, I that's what I was going to say, Cassie. So what is it going to say that you're going to have a restorative justice workshop or something, and we'll just leave it open-ended like that, or how do you envision it?
I think, yeah, some description like that, like equity restorative justice workshop for all grade levels.
Great. Is that what you're thinking, Mr. Mitchell?
Well, I mean, what I'm hearing from you all is to make sure that we're doing something. It sounded like for students. I would want to have a conversation with alternatives first to see, you know, what is available kind of whole, you know, for all students kind of thing. I understand, you know, wanting to have that in the plan. So I guess that's fine. You know, to put in there that there will be some sort of effort for restorative practice work with students. To have it in there so that it does become a point of emphasis, or it doesn't get forgotten, I should say, because all of this has been emphasized, but so it doesn't get forgotten. as part of things that we're working on for this school year. All right. But
Right,
I don't
and
know.
It can
I don't know.
evolve, you know, it can
Yeah.
evolve, you know,
So I would agree to have the wording about the workshop, but I wouldn't put a dollar amount because again, I agree with you, to be determined, because we got to see whether or not we'll be able to make that happen during the course of this year. In addition to whatever else we have as it relates to restorative practices. Okay. Any other questions before we move on to priority 2? Okay. Priority 2 is the physical safety, and this is the conversation around the security team. Again, that $5,000, that capital expenditure, it won't come from this plan at all, but just noting that that's something that we're looking to have done from a safety and security standpoint. So looking in the areas of vulnerability and improving that. So the additional fencing, so still the estimate was 5,000, but it has increased. But again, it's not something that will come out of the 130,000. It would have to come out of, because it's considered a capital expenditure. But the conversation around the security team member, we've gotten some more information around that. So that's still the recommendation. I did edit it before. It said 1 to 2. Now it just says 1, because that should be sufficient to meet the needs of what we're trying to do. Let's see. Yeah. So any questions, comments, concerns around priority 2? Yes, Sarah.
Sarah?
yeah, I'm sorry, if other people have questions, I definitely want them to go. Thank you for sending the schedule. Would you be willing to kind of talk through that schedule with us? So what I've said in my brain is like, I really want you to sell this to me like you're like a used car salesman. Like I want to be convinced that we need this additional security team member. And it's not that I don't trust what you're saying. I need to be convinced. So if you're willing to walk through the schedule or talk about where the security guards are placed. And I know that you guys talked about this at your meeting. I think it would be good for me to know.
Sure. So you were provided the schedule, and I want to say, if I remember correctly, the schedule that you guys were provided has been this kind of COVID-based security schedule. Prior to COVID, the hours were slightly different. The staggering was done a little bit different. There were some adjustments to make sure we had enough team members in the morning. So on a regular day, the first security team member arrives at 6. I'm talking and I'm jotting it down so I get it right. First person arrives about 6. Then I believe 2 more arrive at 7. And I wish Marge was here because she could correct me. I'll say it like this: by 8 o'clock, there are at this point in time 6 members who are there for the morning rush to receive students. If you had an opportunity to be in the building, when you come in, because all students come in through the main entrance. When you come in through the main entrance, if you can envision there's a pillar right there. So to your left is the security desk, and there's always someone stationed at the security desk. Because they're there for the buzzer to buzz people in, later in the day and whatnot. But during arrival, there are 2 metal detecting machines, and with each machine, it requires 2 people to manage it. One person to view contents in the bag, and then one person when they come through to give them their belongings and to wand. Because the detector, it's a failsafe. So anyway, you need 2 people per machine. So that's 4 that are needed for the metal detectors. The 5th person is at the desk. And so the 6th person will replace where the SRO had been, and where they're positioned, they actually can see what's happening outside, and they actually have a better view because it's a technical flaw. We didn't build it this way, but the security desk is not in the most ideal place. And you can ask any security person how and why that was designed that way. It's a whole nother conversation. But the point is, the sixth security person is positioned where they can see who's outside, who's walking up and down State Street, and could be potentially interacting with our students. We also have buses that come in for our cluster program, and so we have SEEKers who are dedicated to getting those students in and out. So we do have instances where there are some support, but we don't count on the SEEKers as permanent people there, right? So this sixth person would replace where the SRO, because that's what that person had been doing, was securing that and doing the head counts as people come in. I mentioned in one of the emails, we do utilize CPS, Safety and Security gives us a random number each day, and that is how we count who goes to the machine and who doesn't. It is random. So, like I said, if the number is 5, person standing there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we're here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we're there, and they're checking IDs, they're greeting people, and they're paying attention to the door. Because quite honestly, if the person at the security desk, if someone doesn't belong in the building, it's too late for them to acknowledge them because they're already in. It's just the way the security desk is set up. So the person has to actually get in the building for them to be redirected out. So to have this other person, and so with our current numbers, we have to reschedule security so that we have, again, the bulk of them here. And then that leaves us where at this point in time, we only have 2 security team members at dismissal. And that carries over until our 9 o'clock hour. Previously, we would have, with the staggered schedule, from basically 1:30 when the last security team member gets started, from when they get started until 5 o'clock, we go from 6 to 4. So they stagger off. And then by 5 o'clock, we're down to 2. So that is, and we have events, throughout the course of the day. I did just send an email. I apologize for the lateness, but I did explain that in the event that after hours we need additional security, we know in advance, and so some people may come back and work that as overtime. But we minimize that number because the way we stagger our schedule. So there are some people who are supposed to be there, until 9 o'clock at night. Is there a one-page schedule that shows the entirety in their assignments? Yes, I think that our head security has kind of provided that schedule. It's simple. It has the security person's name, their hours, when they break, and some of their locations where, what their expectation is. So like our security team all rotates. They all take turns at being at the desk, and they all take turns kind of rotating. Some are scheduled during lunch periods, and so they're positioned there. But outside of the security desk, there is not a station per se for security. They do kind of are flexible and move around. Daniel, you have a question or a comment?
Yeah. Are you done like talking about the schedule?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And Miss Ma, with what you were like talking about earlier about like selling you why we need this extra one. I remember before there was a lot of hesitancy around having an additional one, that instead we should get like other SEL like positions. But I would say that for security guards, and this is going to be anecdotal and from a student perspective, but they're really helpful in terms of like the school like climate, right? They interact with students very well. They get to know them personally, ask them how was their weekend and stuff like that. And as opposed to the SRLs that we had previously, like no one knew anything about them, right? But with the security guards, in the past, students have celebrated like their birthdays, pizza parties, they retire, or when they retire and stuff like that. So they're very much part of like the school climate and help facilitate that in a like nice way, right? Boss, I just had a question about the cost of $50,000 per security team member, right? Yeah, no problem. Like, and again, it's very anecdotal, comes from a student perspective, but I believe a lot of students have that view. But for the $50,000, in the updates that Cassie sent earlier, it talked about her conversation with Jadine Chow. It seems like Jadine Chow and her office would take the cost on, and they were okay with having one extra one. Like, they're not taking that cost? Because from the conversation and the emails, that's what it sounded like to me. I just want to get that clear.
Yeah, to be clear, this extra security would come out of this pool of money, at least for this next year. Thank you again, Daniel, for that perspective and that point. Definitely want to add that. And I also want to add, because you raised the point that like we were looking at kind of an either or, because if we had this baseline of money that we needed that we wanted to spend, that we wanted to make sure we are getting that additional SEL support. And what I want to be able to share with you all today, not necessarily sell you, but just kind of tell you what's factual, is we are getting some additional supports for SEL and mental health that will be free of charge through the district, so that it doesn't have to be security or a social worker or security or this. We should have money to get the security person and the SEL support person or coordinator, or whatever we title that person, but there should be enough funds there to absorb most of that expense. And then everything else that we're looking for can be paid for out of the ADF funds. Some of the things that we're looking for will be one-time fixes. So for example, the fixed cost for Emoja, the curriculum will be what it costs, but the support will only be a one-time thing. Like we won't need the support that they're providing next year, because we will have learned how to implement, and we'll have some people in-house that will be able to move that work forward. So I just kind of went off on a tangent, but wanted to give you kind of the whole scope and in terms of how this money can be spent, because I know that was a big concern initially.
Elaine, did you have your hand up previously?
I did. I removed it. I was just wanted to clarify, having a one-page document that has the entire security team and the entire hours from top to bottom it's an essential part of like the safety plan, but it gives that visual. I think that will be helpful for what Sarah is asking for, so that you can see and identify if there are gaps or where there may be a need. So that was the reason why I inquired. I was two-time and looking through my own documents as an example. I'm not sure if that's what the officer provided. And I know that even though there was a pandemic schedule, perhaps you all had something from prior to that you might have like in your Google Docs or something that can show that, so that you can kind of identify like, this is what we have here with our present staff. And then if there is a gap, it would help to identify that, but go for it.
It looks like what you put in the chat, that document, that looks pretty accurate. I just took another quick glance at it, but that seems to be the one pager that you're referring to. And then any other, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I have to see. I'm sorry, you said there's something in the chat that you placed?
Sarah put that in there.
Okay, let me take a look at it. Pardon me. I was searching up some files, some examples of what I was asking for. So I'll take a look at it. Thank you, Mr. Mitchell.
No problem. Okay.
Do you want to go next?
Yes, just briefly, looping back to the role of the CPS safety and security. Even if we are doing the funding through these additional funds, that is coming from safety and security as such. And we still have to have their support, i.e. the training, certification of our office, any additional officer, that type of thing. So it's a partnership between us and CPS safety and security.
Yeah, so the $50,000 would come from this 130 is what we're saying. Thanks. Roberto?
Hey, so I just want to thank, first of all, Ms. Margaret Hugs for providing that information and really giving some additional information for at least for me to make an informed decision. And Mr. Mitchell, this has been super fruitful and engaging just to hear more about the security. I didn't realize that it took two individuals to manage the what do you call it, the
Metal detector.
The backpack check. Yeah, the metal detector. And that there was one person in.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I was just saying that it is a process, and it is a two-man, ordeal. So yes.
Yeah, so that is helpful for me to know. And then it sounds like, Mr. Mitchell, that is there some, well, let me ask, is one of the security team members outside the building and just, walking between the area, or just like in front of the building, greeting the students and welcoming them into the school, or are they inside the building?
It depends on the day. They try to be outside, but at the bare minimum, they're right inside, like I said, where they can see students coming in and see street side at the same time. I can definitely tell you after school, with the security team that's available, and we have had some people who have just, they may have just gotten off their shift and will stick around a little bit, but we have security strategically kind of staggered down State Street. So at the main entrance, we have two there. One stays inside, one's at the door. There are probably two outside. And again, this was pre-COVID when we had the resources. There's two outside. One usually positions himself at the corner of State and Polk. And the other one is by the double doors because we've learned to access that space as a way for students to come out. And there's actually another security person on the inside in the north building, making sure students get out safely. And then that's where I have taken upon myself to work with, at the time, the SROs, and just making sure kids got across Harrison safely. Because that is a kind of harried intersection and cars do not always obey traffic signs.
Thank you for that. And I do want to acknowledge Council Member Daniel. I thank you so much. That is, you do bring a very good, fair point and perspective about the difference between the SROs, the Chicago police officers that were in the school, and the security team members and their value to welcoming and creating an inclusive school environment. So thank you for that, Daniel.
Any additional questions as it relates to priority 2? So I can move on to priority 3 and just provide updates. Looks like Marge is going to join the call. So I'll maybe, I guess, hold the space until she can get on. Or if you guys prefer, I can move on to 3, and then when she gets on, I can allow her to answer or clarify anything that I missed.
Yeah, let's go on to 3 and then come back.
Okay, no problem. So with priority 3, this was the big piece that at least I feel that we wanted to make sure we were able to satisfy, which is this position that would focus on the social emotional supports and working with administration, and so. As it stands right now, there is funding for that. You guys wanted a description, I think, and I said this at the last meeting, the best description that seems to meet some of the things that you guys mentioned that you wanted, and it fits. So if it doesn't say it verbatim, word for word, what you want, it is in the spirit, and it's a CPS position. So there's a salary range that's affixed to it, and so it would meet the criteria, and that would be the culture and climate coordinator. So based upon what I looked at previously, the salary range, we've seen coordinators base salary be as low as 50,000 and as high as 92. So if we can, hire someone that's in that medium range, we'll definitely be within the 130. But if not, and I'll let Dr. Power speak to this, but it seems feasible that we would have enough money in internal accounts to cover the potential overage.
That's correct. We would also still have some funds potentially from the ADF grant for this coming school year. But I anticipate that would be nothing more than some overflow cost. I don't think it would be a major portion of it.
So yeah, so just wanted to acknowledge for priority 3 that was the big piece was that position being afforded. Again, put in there for numbers sake and understanding the work. So we still have our peer conferencing program that would support this effort. And so just acknowledging that that's still part of the overall plan that we would continue. So it was listed not for financial reasons, but to acknowledge as far as plan implementation in the overall, whole school safety for staff and students. So any other questions centered around that? Oh, before you ask your question, Mr. Minjar, I do want to address the last piece of that. I forgot. It says the commitment by school leadership to present a plan. As of right now, because we just got all these resources kind of brought to our attention within the last week in terms of what the district is going to offer us and what is being made readily available to us. At the last meeting, you guys asked for some dates. And so what I can tell you is we are currently working on a plan that we have to present to the district early next week that we'll get some feedback on and we'll finalize. And Dr. Powers, correct me if I'm wrong, I think August 16th. So that's a week before the teachers arrive, but we'll have a finalized plan as it relates to kind of all of the SEL supports that we have in place, that we will have in place for this upcoming school year. So we could, give you an update at the next LSC meeting, August 10th, since that falls right in between, for the finalized. But I know you guys asked for a date, and so that's what I can give you at this point in time. Sarah, the additional 30,000, it's my understanding that whatever amount that we're being given by CPS right now is the one that will be continual. And I can answer that question. There's not a draft to be provided. We were just given a template. So any of the work that we've kind of created, we have to now take all that and apply it to this template that we've been provided by the district. So there's nothing that we would be able to present at this very moment as it relates to the draft.
Yeah. We have to present the draft to our network chief by beginning of next week, next Monday. And then after feedback, we have our final draft going into CPS in the middle of the month, as Eric indicated.
For clarification, I feel like I'm a little confused. Are we talking about the social emotional, like the SEL plan, or are we talking about the plan for the MFT dollars? I think I lost the thread that we're.
Cassie, I kind of think they're interconnected. So it is so Sarah, to your point, it is the MFT template that the district has some dollar amounts, connected to, but whatever we're planning, it's integrated. So our SEL plan is a part of that moving forward together plan. So it'll all get kind of, I won't say mashed together, but that's where it should be housed, or that's where we plan on housing that plan.
Roberto?
Yeah, so I have a few questions regarding the position and description. And again, Mr. Mitchell, this has been really, really helpful for me. I guess I picked up on a word that you just mentioned, that for this year, we can support this SEL position. Is that depending on, what is that depending on? Because I think to Sarah's question, we, at least I understood it, I should use the word I understood it as that the $130,000 now, or at least before it was $100,000, CPS would continuously provide that, and that we would use, it sounds like now, use part of that $50,000, up to $50,000 for the additional security team member, and possibly this SEL culture and climate coordinator position. So I just want to make sure that the plan is long-term, that this person will be there. And the reason I bring this up is because something you mentioned earlier about the Emoja program, right? We will have the curriculum. We won't necessarily need their expertise, because someone will be able to take what we've learned, or take what you've learned and implement it on an ongoing basis. So that culture and climate coordinator could fulfill that responsibility as well.
So I apologize, if I gave the impression that it's only 1 year. It is my understanding, just as it is of yours, that this money that we're receiving from CPS should be annual, as they have said to us in different settings. So that I have the same understanding as you all. So I apologize for leading you all astray by saying for this year. But yeah, it is my understanding that this should be a annual dollar amount that will be afforded.
Okay, and the position is something that Jones is committed on a long-term basis, not just 1 year. Right now it is 1 year, but it's a commitment for long-term health and health of the school.
That is correct.
Okay. And then as far as the SEL program, I know you said, I think you mentioned that you're meeting with the district, and the district in the past year has announced various frameworks, like the healing-centered framework, the transforming bias-based framework, and those things there will be elements from those frameworks included in the SEL program. And I want to highlight the incident reporting form, which students have repeatedly asked for, and we know that the OSP, the Office of Student Protections in Title IX, issued out or announced released their transforming bias-based harm, and there's an incident reporting there. So I want to make sure that all of that is going to be included in this comprehensive SEL program.
Absolutely. I don't know that I hear what you're saying, and it will be included. I'm not sure how it will fit in the program. So I don't know if there will be a line item that says incident report, but those are all things that have been not just mentioned, but thoroughly discussed and will be utilized. I know I publicly said at one of the last LSC meetings that, that new reform would be implemented. So yes, whether or not it gets put into the actual SEL plan, I can't speak to that, but you raised a great point, and those things will be added. I was in conversation with Michelle Jackson from the Office of Social Emotional Learning, and she shared with me, the supports that we qualify for, and we also asked for additional supports. There was a form that we could opt into. So there's a bunch of services that we are getting ahead of to improve our overall social emotional well-being and our mental health elements. So there are partnerships that are being provided that will address those things. We are putting together a behavioral health team, and we're going to get coaching supports and some services pushed in from the district as it relates to our behavioral health team. So there are tons of things that are all coming together that we need to kind of get down to paper to be able to share with everyone. But things are moving very quickly.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell.
Kazi, do we want to give Marsh the floor, or do we want to move on to the last piece?
How about we go through the last piece, and then we'll probably
Sure.
have questions that kind of bounce back and forth a little bit. So I think
Understood.
Yeah.
Okay.
Most coherent.
So the last priority, our recommendations are still there. So the development of behavioral health team, we are actively working on that. We have we have some people who have some expertise in behavioral health teams, helping us shape what it would look like in the building. And so we're working out, some dedicated time that they'll be able to do what they need to do. The second point is establishing community partnership with a mental health provider. The district is helping us do that. So that is not what that recommendation will happen, and it will be of no cost to us. So because it does say establish a community partnership to help with mental health supports or an additional social worker. And so we're going to get those services for free. So the additional social worker, we still might get. If we do, it would be paid through the Office of Diverse Learning, ODLSS. And that will be based upon our numbers. And I know that there was a conversation about how much support a school social worker can provide because of their caseload. And so I do want to acknowledge that the school, the support that we're getting from the district, I was told expressly that like this would be services for everybody. So you wouldn't, it doesn't just mean if you have an IEP or a 504, this would be for all students to have access to these supports. I'm still getting clarity about whether or not this is a push-in model where those supports would happen in the building, or whether or not, you know, these are services that happen outside of school that the students would still have at no cost. But that was very promising information provided at our district-wide session last week. So that's some hot off the presses information that we didn't have at the July 10th meeting that we just found out. So as far as our fourth priority, we will have a partnership that won't cost us anything. We could still potentially have some money set aside for the behavioral health team because they may have to meet after school hours. But from an implementation standpoint, it's definitely happening. And I don't think that whatever stipends we determine would have to come out of the 130,000. It would come out of potentially ADF funds or you know, some other means. It doesn't have to come out of that 130. Any questions about priority 4? Is there a plan? Well, we have to, as far as Sarah, how to access the supports, we have to find out, we have to be clear, and once we know what the supports are, then we can work out that plan. And so at this very moment, there is not a plan for how the students will access it, because we have to know who the partnership is, and so that, you know, we can get there. Any other questions?
Elaine, do you want to go ahead? Because I think Mr. Mitchell was addressing your question in the chat, so maybe you.
Mr. Mitchell, thank you so much for the information. I think that it will be beneficial approach for how students will access it. And I say that because it's been somewhat of a recurrent theme of perhaps there are things available, but the gap between accessing it and who actually is initiating the access. So it's like, it's there if they just go on the website, or it's there. And so I think that what would be helpful while you're in the developmental stages is to come up with a plan. So if we have an additional social counselor or resources, how will students access that, given that they may be in a vulnerable state? How can the school be proactive? They shorten the path for that service.
I agree with you 100%, Ms. Buggs. And so when we have a little more information, we can definitely do that. We don't have enough right now to create that plan, because we'd hate to put something in place and then it not be the way it's going to operate. So for example, if we know that our partnership is going to be push-in services, we have to be able to allocate when is that time to where students can push in. You know, would it be during their ACLA time, and then just making that available and publicizing where these services are, and, you know, come to the counseling corner. Like, there's some pieces that we still have to know in order to do that, but that's definitely on the forefront of our minds, not an afterthought. So definitely, you know, thank you for raising that point in terms of it being very clear, concise, and proactive in terms of reaching out, not just that, oh, it's here. You know, if you look under the right rock, you know, as I joke, but it's very clear and concise about where these services are going to be made available. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell.
Sarah?
Yeah, so this priority, so apologize if you said this, I'm also taking notes. The behavioral health team is in-house. It's teachers and counselors, or just teachers?
As of right now, based upon, you know, some of the people who have done behavioral health teams previously, the behavioral health team, although it seems like it's its own entity, it does kind of fall under SEL. So it would involve counselors, it would involve case manager, social worker, and school psychologist.
Okay.
This particular team, I don't think, you know, based upon the level of expertise, would involve staff, or teachers, I should say. Teachers may make recommendations, you know, to the behavioral health team, but as far as the actual work within the team will be from those people based upon their expertise.
And just because I have never worked with a behavioral health team, is there kind of like a criteria that they use? Is do they have like a mission? Like what do you see as like their end, what their impact?
Great questions, and those are things that we're still working through.
Okay,
I mean,
okay.
We know that this is an intricate part. Like if you're really serious about SEL, you have to have this component in place. And so we are in the developmental stages, and we
Great.
want to make sure we're doing it right, because you can go and research and talk to behavioral health teams at Lane and at these other places, but that's what works for them. So we have to embrace the fact that the need is there, and then what is that behavioral health team going to look like at Jones, based upon who is a part of it, their availability, and like to your point, what is going to be the process? How are they going to receive the students? What supports are they going to be able to present or provide as a team, or where are they going to direct the service? Like, so there are a bunch of questions that we still need to address. We just have right now where we're building the people who are going to build the team. So that we're in the infant stages. And yes, the behavioral health team is connected to the MTSS. MTSS is the big umbrella for everything. It is the systems that need to be in place to provide all of the services for students, whether it's social, emotional, or academic support, or this behavioral side of it. And so when it's all said and done, they're all interconnected. And that is our main focus this year. It's just really making sure those services and systems, I should say, are as clear as possible, so that everyone knows where they can find what they need, and get the help and support that they need.
Do you, and I just I will finish my question, but in these other schools, is that generally led by like an AP or like someone on the like, is there a leader, or is it just kind of like a it's all, or is that something we still figuring out?
So if you're asking the leader of particularly the behavioral health team, again, that's kind of like an offshoot of your overall MTSS programming,
Okay.
Which is supported by school leadership and other entities. So yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Menjivar, are you putting those elements in the chat for everyone's understanding, or you have a question behind that?
Oh yeah, that's just for everybody, for council members as well as the Jones School community to understand. Here's the framework, and they can review it at their leisure.
Thank you. Any additional questions? Because we've gone through the 4 priorities and really just tried to emphasize the largest expenditures are the 2 positions, the security position and the SEL support, school culture and climate, that other position. And it seems that we can make that work with the 130,000 that we've been provided. All the other recommended items that have a cost can be those costs can be eaten up by the ADF funds. So I guess my question to you all as the committee is, the plan as it currently stands, I guess, where are you guys with that? Like, what other questions do you have as it relates to maybe the financial expenditures? I know that there's still some pieces that need some answers, but has there been enough provided for you all in order to make it a more informed decision?
I'll go with a question just on priority 4. There's an or there, so that's establish a community partnership or get an additional social worker. So not both.
So it can be both. I put or, if or was written that way, if it was affixed to the cost, so like if a social worker was to cost $60,000, right? But like we wanted to make sure that there was options. So right now we could actually potentially have both, right? As I mentioned, we're working on, we may be granted another social worker based upon our numbers. So we may have that support. But if we're talking about support for all students in terms of mental health needs, the partnership is a better option because of their availability to more students. So when we first wrote it, it was either or, but in actuality, we might be in a position where we could actually have both, and both at no cost. or I should say, let me rephrase that, no cost out of, you know, the 130,000 that is, you know, part of our plan.
Thanks. Rachel?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I don't know if this is the exact right time to bring it up, but I did want to just bring back something that I think it was Miss Bugs brought up a few meetings ago. I think the first meeting that we had on the whole school safety plan. Mr. Mitchell and I talked about this and thinking about, you know, like the implementation of the plan. How do we check to see how the plan is being implemented, and how can communication between the whole school safety committee and the LSC continue throughout the year? So I just wanted to bring up something that we both kind of talked about, which is using the health and safety committee as an area to relay some of the updates to the implementation of the plan. And then through the health and safety committee, I would, you know, give reports at our monthly meetings about, you know, there being a section just really regarding the whole school safety plan, because I know there was a question about like, well, how do we check on the plan's implementation? So I just wanted to bring that up as a possibility for the year.
Oh, yeah. So let's return to Ms. Hug. If she has any comments from before when we were asking questions. I think there's at least one thing where Mr. Mitchell was hoping you could weigh in, but I don't remember what that question was now.
It was centered around scheduling and just when people arrived, if there was anything different than what she had put in the calendar, that she could speak more to it. Because I want to say, I think she was one of the people whose schedule was shifted slightly to accommodate our new health screeners and temperature checks, and you know the added hands that were needed to get students in the building efficiently early, you know, during COVID.
Do you have any other additional schedule stuff, Marge, that you want to share with us?
No, the schedule that I sent to everybody was just a tentative, like it was just during the pandemic. So I'm next year coming up, if we're going to have all the kids coming back 5 days a week, which seems like it's going to be, we're going to have about the same amount of people in the morning to do the scanners, the health screener, the temperature, and help the kids put in their health screeners if they can't do it. So the morning will be kind of rough. So I think they're going to keep us on that morning shift that they shift us to. They shift about 2 or 3 of us to an earlier time frame.
And so just to add on to that, by having this additional person, this would allow one of them to bounce back to their regular schedule, which will give us more coverage in the afternoon. Because right now, as Mr. Minjabar had alluded to in one of his emails, we are a little bare bones in the afternoon. This would help strengthen that.
Well, I think, yeah, Sarah had a question in the chat of who does the schedule? Is it like central office or something?
No, we have a lead security officer, Horatio Harris, who builds the schedule based on people's availability, and we make adjustments based upon some the need at the school. So it is an in-house schedule made. The schedule's made in-house, I should say.
Roberto?
Yeah, I just wanted to personally thank Ms. Huggs for joining us and just for providing the information about the security team members' responsibility and schedule. I know when I joined the Jones community in 2019, she has helped me a couple times. So I really do appreciate that. Thank you, Ms. Huggs. That's
no problem. Thank you.
Sarah, I'm not understanding your question. Who was they?
Oh, that Ms. Hugg answered that. That was who did the schedule when she was like, they moved us earlier. And my other question was with the screener, obviously that's probably going to stay. Did CPS say temperature checks will also remain, or can we get rid of that now?
We don't know. But what we have done to minimize and to free up some hands is we've ordered a few more of the touchless, so that moves things a lot faster than the handheld temperature checks that we had. So we've ordered some, and so now we'll have a few more. So that process should move a little bit faster, and then again that frees up someone from having to do just the temperature checks.
Mr. Mitchell, I think the only thing that usually tries and slows us down is not so much the temperature. If the kids have the health screening not done prior to getting in, then we have to like put them to the side so that they can do it. Or if their parents do it in the morning, then we physically have to go into the laptop and look them up. Unless they can provide us with a copy of the screen of the release from their parents that they did it.
Thank you for that clarification, Marge. There's another question in the chat, or someone has a hand raised.
Yeah, Raquel, we will do your public participation after this item, if you just want to hold on. Do we have more comments on this? I have a general question about the costs. I feel like there's like additional staff stuff in here like that we aren't really writing into the costs. And I'm worried about the idea that we're dedicating, we're going to dedicate $50,000 to an entire security position. Whereas meanwhile, like, are people going to take on this extra behavioral health team stuff for free? Does it fit into their additional duties? And especially with something like a school psychologist, I don't believe that we have a school psychologist. So the only school psychologist units that we have are dedicated to kids getting services. So I'm not sure how would we have to budget for time from a school psychologist to be on a behavioral health team? Dr. Powers or Mr.
Yeah,
Mitchell?
we have a shared psychologist. There's nobody in that. We haven't been told who it's going to be this year because our person who was with us, I think 4.5 days a week, just as our social worker is, and that is paid for by CPS, by ODLSS. So we will have a new person coming in there. As far as the behavioral health team, we're looking at ways in which we can provide the dedicated time for people in that. And that would probably end up having to be outside of regular school hours, in which case we're looking at a stipend system for that. But that will not rise to the level of cost that some of these other things do. In other words, we'll be able to absorb that within internal accounts without too much difficulty. Once we settle on it, determine number of people and how much the stipend would be.
Roberto?
And this is a question for Dr. Powers. I think you mentioned that the school was, in one of the LSC meetings, I think you mentioned that the school was going to get a second case manager. Would that, is that correct? And would that person be able to support the behavioral health team?
Of course, yes. And we have the person now being staffed right now.
If I might interject, I did mention, and I know I've given a lot of information, but when I mentioned the behavioral health team, it would be composed of the case managers, plural, our counseling team, ideally the social worker and the school psychologist. So again, we're in the infant stages. Those are the people who we believe should be on it. But we have to work out, again, a dedicated time that they can meet. So you're right to ask those questions. But it sounds like, from a financial standpoint, we'll be able to handle if they need to meet their school hours.
And both of our case managers, both Mrs. Rebecca, and our new case manager have a significant amount of experience working in behavioral health team settings. So I think we will have good resource there with those two individuals.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Sarah.
So thank you very much. You answered a lot of outstanding questions that I had, and I like the spirit of this plan, and I think it's a good step forward for the school. And I'm just nervous, or I would like to have some clarification, with this estimate. I think as a council, it'd be helpful, Dr. Powers, to have your guidance of, we keep saying, oh, we'll cover the extra in internal accounts, or we'll cover this, and maybe we need to set a limit to that, or just have that in mind. So if you have 130,000 and 50s for the security office, you have 80,000 left. That's probably will all go to this restorative justice dean. If that covers that position, it might actually not cover it. And then we have a stipend for behavioral health, the Emoja costs. I'm just trying to list the different costs. Is there a number that we're not willing to spend? And only because I know that we're about to approve a bunch of check requests, and one of them is, $23,000 for an auditorium. So I'm just trying to be realistic, and is this something we can cover with internal accounts, or do we need to ask Friends of Jones do we need to write a grant to ask for help for Emoja or something? What are your thoughts?
At this particular point, I think we'd be premature doing that. I believe, but when we look at the various funding sources, for example, the ADF funds, which we have available to us, which are specifically for these kinds of areas, the funds we will be getting on an ongoing basis from CPS, the 130,000 as a result of eliminating the SRO positions, that will continue. Now, the ADF funds may or may not continue, or may or may not continue in that amount. But some of those are budget bridges we'll have to cross when we get to them. But overall, anything that doesn't quite completely fit, in other words, it's, the square peg in the round hole sort of thing in terms of budgeting, will be relatively minor amounts. And when I say relatively, not $100,000. We're talking about, a few $1,000s here and there. And we will have the wherewithal to do that with those other funds that we do have available, or through internal accounts.
Any other additional questions for me as it relates to the plan?
I don't think so. Not seeing any hands. I think we should talk about how to structure the motions on this. If we're talking about creating positions, then we need to have separate motions on those. It's somewhat unusual because since the positions are essentially funded for security, usually I don't get something an LSC normally votes on to open and put into place. So I am not entirely certain what our responsibility is with respect to that. But yeah, and we could, I think, even vote by priority if we wish, sort of like we did with the budget. We kind of broke it out. Dr. Powers?
Yeah, I would recommend, though, that we vote for the plan in toto, because the specifics within that are all things to be implemented. For example, the hiring of 2 people outlined in the plan there. I think those are things that can be undertaken through the school staff, and then we will work with any kind of additional budget flexibility we have to have. In other words, like I mentioned a few moments ago, if the 130 doesn't exactly cover those 2 positions, then we can look to some other funds that we have available to round that out. But I don't see the need for a point-by-point vote, because this is a comprehensive plan, and it's intended to be a plan as a whole with a lot of interacting segments. So looking at it piece by piece, I don't think is necessary.
Roberto?
So as a suggestion, perhaps, I don't know if it's in this plan, but in case the positions that we're voting to open and the $130,000 doesn't cover for those positions, perhaps we could put something in this plan indicating that the Jones School will identify sources, other funding sources, either through internal accounts to fulfill those positions.
Again, I don't know that that's really necessary. In other words, whenever we have a need to fill a position, if we're slightly short in one particular fund area, we will look to other sources to try to round that out and then and make them balance that way. And we've done that before. We've had staff positions that were paid half out of one fund and half out of another simply because we could not cover it in one particular one, or we transfer some funds from one account to another, which we can do
where I'm
accounts.
My apologies. I guess where I'm coming from, Dr. Powers, is that we've opened up, we're paying for 3 positions through the internal accounts. So this would be, I'm looking at it from that lens. And so if we can add some language in this program, I think that would reassure, at least it would give me some reassurances that we're going to fund these 2 positions.
You have my assurance. We can put it in writing if you wish, but you have my assurance.
If I might interject, at the bottom of the template where there's a dollar amount, which probably needs to be altered now at this point in time, but it says that it does say we'll receive 100,000 from CPS, and it basically says the school will fund the difference. So it is kind of written in there. We just need to make the adjustment about what the actual amount is based upon what's in the plan. So if we need to be a little more specific, but from the range that we put in there, there's a range. If you look at the draft right now, at the very, very bottom, it's highlighted in yellow, that difference, if we were to stick to it as it states, it says the additional, was it 24 to whatever, 35,000 would be paid for by the school. It wouldn't be that amount, but it still has that language that the difference is going to be paid by the school. So that would be, you know, the reassurance that you were looking for, that we would indeed take care of it. And then Dr. Powers alluded to the how it can be done. So we want the language in the template. I'm just putting it out there that it is kind of already there.
What is the guidepost audit? Sorry, I just don't know what that is. Yeah, it says it right in the template. It says, oh, those are the capital needs. So that's a different audit. It's on the screen right now. It's right.
I'm sorry, I'm looking.
Okay, sorry.
No, I was looking at my own version of it. Let me get back to your screen so I can see it more clearly. I'm sorry. What is your question again? Oh, it says school. Yes, it says school should not include safety, technology, or capital needs in the budget. So what was the capital need was the expenditure for the fencing. If we do indeed follow through with that in terms of ensuring or better securing the space in between the 2 buildings, you know, whatever cost that is, I put in there 5,000. That's what the engineer told me at the time when I put it in there. But working on getting a more comprehensive quote. But regardless of what it is, it wouldn't come out of this money. It would have to come out of capital.
No, that I understood. I just didn't know what the guidepost audit was.
Now that I don't know.
Okay. And then to Deborah's question that the yellow shouldn't, I think Deborah, the question mark was for the amount. But yes, we need to remove that question mark.
Absolutely. I think the question mark also came from one of the network safety managers who had reviewed the plan. Because, you know, we had to submit the plan and it was made for review because CPS had to determine whether or not this was something that would work. There are other schools that had, you know, $200,000-$300,000 worth of expenditures. And, you know, the question was, where was that money going to come from? So again, the managers reviewed it. Then it made its way up to, you know, JD and the higher ups. And so, again, we've been approved for 130,000 to, you know, put towards our plan. So anything outside of that 130, that's what they put there, the school would be responsible for. Any other questions for me?
It does not look like it. So I think, yeah, we should finalize that number there in the document so that it actually adds up correctly to everything that's mentioned. And, I think if people have general comments about the plan and about how they plan to vote, we'll have that discussion now. And do people have comments, LSC members? I overall, I feel very uncertain about this plan still. I'm glad we got a lot of additional information. And I think it's been helpful that we've gone through these multiple iterations. And thank you for your help on that, Mr. Mitchell. Because we don't have this full school social emotional plan that we've been asking for many months now, I feel like we're being given some assurances that this temporary money from CPS will be available to cover these social emotional needs that we've heard the most about, I think, from students. But it seems like, the portion of the actual money that we know that we can dedicate to things, a large portion of that is still going towards this very, security position. And I think in terms of in terms of a support position, security guards just are not the same as trained youth workers. And I have a lot of concerns about that. So, I would be much more comfortable if we were like, look, we need a halftime security position because the morning is going to be very busy, especially because there's health screener stuff. And that's something that we could pay out of ADF funds because of COVID. And, it's actually dealing with that. And then longer term, we'll see what that means. But I do feel unsettled by creating permanent positions and just trading in SROs for security guards when are we really truly addressing the key things that have been missing from the school community? And without the fuller plan, it's so amorphous as to whether that's really going to happen. And I feel like we're getting a lot of assurances that it could happen and that we can just, cover things through internal accounts, but without numbers, I'm concerned about that. Do you have other comments here? Rachel, do you want to go next?
I do. I wanted to just kind of offer a quick perspective as someone who's been on the whole school safety committee and also on the LSC. I will say, moving forward, CPS only allotted, they said, you can add as many students as you wish to the committee, and Daniel has been a steadfast member of the committee. But something that I just wanted to bring back into the discussion is that when we did outreach and try to get feedback from members of the Jones community about what should go into this plan, I do just want to mention, like, students didn't ask for an additional security officer. They asked for mental health supports. And granted, as I said, every time we didn't survey or get a response from every single Jones student. At the same time, I do want to mention, just doing due diligence, that a lot of parents asked to retain security officers and police officers. And so taking a look at both of those, sources, for me, my biggest concern is just we're never actually centering what students ask for when we construct these plans, and that's like a bigger issue than Jones. But I just want to keep bringing it up. And Daniel, I appreciate the perspective that you've added to these conversations. But yeah, just having more than one student voice in the mix. We had, I think 3 students at our initial meeting, but it would just be in the future something to really push to have.
Any other council members on this? Oh, Mr. Mitchell, go ahead.
Just one quick additional comment, and Rachel's actually brought this up in one of the last meetings, that this is, you know, something that we're bringing up now, but if adjustments need to be made, you know, we can adjust this for the following year. Like this is the plan for the now. And so I just, you know, want to, you know, reiterate that everything that Rachel said is accurate, and, you know, we definitely want some more feedback. And I actually hear what you're saying, Kazi, as it relates to, you know, your concerns around where some of the money, I guess some of the permanent money is being spent. I guess I have a little more confidence in the supports and things that are being provided by the district. I'm hoping that because you don't see etched in stone, you know, this actual, you know, SEL plan, but you see the elements of it. You know, I wish that was satisfactory, and I hope that, like, not having that etched in stone is going to, you know, prevent you all from you know, I guess allowing us to kind of move forward with the things that we need to do, with the parts of the plan that kind of need some immediate attention now to implement. So, like, if we're going to have this SEL person, which I believe everyone wants, we need this approved so that we can start looking to hire that person. If we are going to, you know, grant this additional security person, we need to get out there to find, you know, some quality people who will be properly trained and who will bring to the table all the things that Daniel mentioned. So it's beyond just the protection. I understand wanting the technical, the clinician, you know, support, but I do feel like we are beginning to address all the things that Rachel mentioned the students asked for. And I just, you know, just want to leave it at that. And this committee has done its due diligence in, you know, trying to garner, you know, input from as many different sources as possible, and have conversation on top of conversations, various perspectives, and reiterating, you know, are we doing what's in the best, you know, interest of the students? Are we honoring what they've asked for? So, you know, we've constantly had all these conversations, and here's what we've presented to you all. You know, and definitely, as you mentioned, different iterations. We've given more clarity, giving you all more perspective, to make the most informed decision. So I just, you know, want to put that out there.
Thanks. And so, yes, I think we do need to fill in a bit of this before we can make it a real motion. So we need a responsible, sort of like a point person in each priority, under responsible owner.
Do you want me to reshare and edit? Because there were some questions about the. Okay.
So that we can, yeah, if we're gonna vote on it in one fell swoop, then I think it should have that.
Can I add something?
Sorry, yes, go ahead.
So I think a lot of the issues I was hearing was brought up about the one security guard again, and I think we're in this plan. There's a proposed other position, right? I think that's a good position. That's a really good position, and how the school or we choose to fill that position can be determined after the vote, right? But I think the services right here that are listed that you can see right now under priority one, I think these are going to be the biggest help to students. I think one faculty position can help, but to an extent, right? Whether that's helping students one-on-one, those appointments, they will flood, and a lot of students are not going to have access to them, right? And even if you just have that one student like capacity, like maximum that they can meet with them once, that's not going to be very helpful, right? I think these services during ACT Lab or other scheduled times or Ego Lab, I think these are going to be the most helpful because it's a set time, like every other week or each week that students are going to be engaged with an actual teacher leading them or a coach, whoever comes in, right? I think these services, rather than one person, are going to be the most helpful.
Thanks, Daniel. Yeah, I think it's a good point that should be a systematic and systemic plan, and not just dependent on a single. So yeah, so Sarah, let's try to fill this in, and anything else left, like ors or ambiguity, I think we need to try to clarify here before we can vote.
So priority one, and please correct me, Mr. Mitchell, we were taking out Emoja because we weren't sure, but we still wanted to do the equity restorative justice workshop. Like, does this all stay the same in this column? So I get services from vendor.
You're muted, Mr. Mitchell.
Oh,
I'm sorry. I was suggesting to remove the 2200 equity workshop provided by Emoja. Now, Mr. Minjar mentioned keeping, some sort of equity, workshop in the plan as something that should be done. And then perhaps putting to be determined, I think you put it in the chat, like an amount to be determined, and that these services may be provided by alternatives. I mentioned I needed to have that conversation with them to see what that was going to be like. But the actual 2200 for that workshop, that was Emoja specific as part of their kind of menu of items that they offered. So we would remove that 2200 as an Emoja service. The Emoja services now would be the 5,000 SEL, which is broken down the 1,250 per grade level. So 1,250 times 4, and then the 12,000 are the customized support curriculum coaching sessions, implementation coaching sessions. And after talking with the Emoja representative, she's going to provide the school with a slightly different customized plan. I don't know how much more or less it's going to be, but from our conversation, it sounds like it should still be in that same range.
Okay, and then should I put your name under here for?
As far as the person who will be responsible.
It says, yeah, responsible owner.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
And then
You can put me and SEL person to be hired, because that falls under what they would be doing.
do we want to leave it as just that SEL person, or do we want to name it?
I don't know who we want to name, but
I don't mean a person. I meant like the sort of justice coordinator or dean of culture and climate, or do we just want to put SEL position?
Put SEL position right now because we haven't determined what that title is going to be called. The recommendation from the committee was to use the job description for the culture and climate coordinator, and that was where the salary ranges that are listed there, came from. So, but that's where you guys can, I guess, have a little more, conversation. If you go with a director of anything more, that's going to be a lot more money.
Yes. Okay. I'm just making sure. Maybe I'm just making sure I read the chat. Monthly updates, Emoja. Can we name them in the plan? Daniel's asking. Cassie was saying that we really don't need to put vendors in this plan. If we want to, I guess we can.
It's fine. You can just say services being provided, outside services being provided at this cost.
Okay. And I think we need to get to Elaine's question, but maybe let's go through and finish editing, and then this document doesn't really have an accountability piece built in, but definitely a future process would be good. Okay, so I'm sorry, Cassie. Okay. Priority 2. Who is the responsible?
You can put me down for that.
Inside our approach, current SEO. They would provide additional attention. Do you want to leave that in here? What is they? Who is the
that was going to be, I mean, that blurb is the, what is that category? That's the kind of where we are currently or how we got there. So that's kind of historical context. I forget what that column is. Existing strategies or interventions.
Okay.
That what was existing.
I see. Thank you. Okay. Priority 3, you know, this sounds like this is everybody. You know, Dr. Powers, Mr. Mitchell. I think the LSC, you know, has some part in this. I'm open to what you want me to put in there.
I'd recommend we put in the leadership team. And actually, that could be true for almost every one of these priorities.
I know, but I think it's really important to have a point person. I mean, that's why they have the they name it as responsible owner. So actually, I would rather have it be a point person. Doesn't mean that you're not all part of it.
I would argue that the leadership team would be the owner of that. I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
But until we clearly define, like, let's just say that I'm the AP over culture and climate, then that would make sense for me to be responsible for X, Y, and Z. But it is a full leadership team decision-making process or supporting all these things. We would be the owner. So
Okay.
That's just my 2 cents.
It's fair.
I concur.
So I do have a question about that. Why? How is that different from the security team member that we're hiring? We've listed Dr. Powers there, but we're having this very general, kind of ambiguous leadership team for this SEL support program or SEL support position.
I'm sorry to interrupt. It's not ambiguous. And actually, if Dr. Powers just finished saying that really you could put leadership team for all of the categories. So it's not that we're doing this specifically for the SEL. If we wanted to, we could go back and name the leadership team for each one of the priorities, if that pleases the council. Because rather than getting into the weeds about the specific leadership person who's responsible, it is a collaborative effort from the entire leadership team. We would be
fair point.
Accountable. Okay.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And then I guess that I do like Sarah's suggestion or recommendation about also including the LSC on that priority 3 for the SEL position description. I think it's important that the LSC has input on that position. And so I think that needs to be included. And Councilmember Daniel, I do appreciate what you just said about priority number 1 and how that could benefit a wider group of students and the school community. But what we have noticed, or what I have noticed, what I have noticed is that it seems like there isn't an individual who can coordinate all of those things and assess and evaluate and reassess and ensure that those things are being implemented, that practices, restorative justice, equity practices are being implemented. Our APs and our Dr. Powers are stretched thin. And so having that individual making sure that every department is incorporating elements to serve all students is important. So I think that coordinator position is very important in order for all of this to be effective.
Yeah, I think I would add that local school council thing, and then the commitment by school leadership is school leadership, that next point. So I think we're fine on that. And so is 4 also school leadership then? Or will this SEL position hiring person likely have a key role? in priority 4?
I would think it'd be school leadership and the SEL person. So I would think that's shared, or both parties.
Or who leads MTSS right now?
That is led by school leadership and then the MTSS team. So perhaps you put the MTSS team as the owner for that, because all of that it offshoots from the implementation of MTSS, which does include school leadership, which does include some teachers, which does include some counselors. So I guess the most appropriate owner would be the MTSS team.
I think Rachel's doing the math for me real quick so I can just update the math. And I updated the language of that Deborah asked. It says whole school safety will fund 130,000. School will fund the remaining, whatever that is. I was trying to do the math, but I didn't do the math and everything. And again, the range is obviously just really an estimate because, we just took out the 2,200 because we weren't sure. Then we had the 16,000, but we're not sure, so it's really looking for an estimate, which it does say right here, so.
I think the only definite numbers there are 17,000. I think everything else is unspecified.
Okay, so we'll just do the math right now. So we have, so you want me to put this 5,000?
Yeah, the 5 and the
12,000, okay, and then I got a spreadsheet going already, 50,000, and then we have what, 50 to 90, so that's our range. 92.
I think the highest for that, I don't know, and I got 161,000.
Okay, give me a sec. Okay, I'll just corroborate your 2335. Do we want to ballpark? We don't want to ballpark BHT. Behavioral health team, sorry.
Not at this time, no.
Okay, so okay, I understood it really quick. So I mean, just to be rough, it's 120 to 160,000 because we just, we took, this is rough. I'm not even gonna do that. I'm just gonna do to 100. It's like 161, but I'm just gonna put 160. 161, fine. Okay. I'll round up. It was 120,000 to 162,000, and then so what did I do? 120, 160, and then we have 130. Oh. Remaining is 0 if it's only 120, but to 30,000. I mean, it's going to be more. That's what's frustrating about this because we have so many unspecified. The remaining 30 to we don't know. I mean, that was my question. It's like, do we want to put an upper limit or do we just want to deal with that when we get there?
Because we don't know the person that we're going to be hiring, we don't know exactly what that person's salary and benefits are going to cost. Again, that's something we're going to have to determine and then see what are, if any, additional funds are needed beyond that 130.
I would be much more comfortable saying the estimate is 120 to 162,000, and the school will fund the remaining, and not put a dollar amount for that because we don't. Putting 30 is disingenuous because we don't. There's so much that we don't have a number for. So I feel better just taking that out.
That would be fine with me.
Oh, okay, thanks, Deborah. I don't know what the exact. I'm like that little. Okay, so I made all the edits that I think needed to be done. Let me scroll to the bottom. That's that's it. So June, we will update on 7:27. Okay. Okay, Cassie?
So I think we can make a motion to cover this whole thing. And I think we also need to make 2 separate motions to create these new positions, because that's what we would do if we were creating positions separately. And it's a big commitment to create a position. And so, I think we need to take that seriously and hold a separate vote on each of those positions in addition to this. And I would prefer that that position creation involve the LSC in some way. So involve the LSC in writing the job description, and then also involve the LSC in the hiring process. And so we could craft that into the motion for each of those. And I think that's in line with LSC's roles in making recommendations for hiring in general. But I think initially our motion is to vote on this plan as it's written.
Okay, so maybe while we do that, someone can craft the motion for the positions. If anyone wants to write that, so I could start with the motion to approve the whole school safety plan. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me write this down. I actually didn't pre-write these motions. I'm making a motion to approve the whole school safety plan as presented by the whole school safety committee this evening. Elaine?
Yes. So just as a point of clarification, for the motion, if we vote on the motion, is that at all connected to the vote on the position? Because I think the whole plan asks for a security position. I just want to be clear that how that's going to work.
Do you think we should be voting on the positions first?
Maybe. Yeah, because I'm wondering, like, if you vote yes for the plan, I think you're essentially voting yes for both positions, unless I'm misunderstanding something. If someone could clarify that for me.
Yeah, my intention was that we describe how, we actually make sure that that we are creating these positions and we're describing the process of them as well. So yes, it's not very cooperative to vote yes on the plan and then vote no on the positions if you're a council member, but it would be possible logically. It just wouldn't be very helpful. Dr. Powers?
Yeah, just to reiterate what I said earlier, the positions are integral to the proposed plan. If there's any additional language that you wish to add, I think that's fine, but otherwise I would much prefer that we vote on the plan in toto rather than to break it out in pieces like this. That is my opinion.
Yeah, I think we should have a vote. You're voting on the whole plan, including creating these positions. And then we will do 2 additional motions to describe that we are creating each position and the process for that, because I would like to vote on the LSC having a role in the job description and the selection, which, that's not something normally we do for, say, teaching positions. So I think it'd be good to make it explicit. Deborah?
I was just wondering if instead of having to craft all these motions, if we were to just take a poll of the council before we take the vote to see where everybody's thinking, because I think we can save ourselves a lot of time instead of crafting each motion separately. If the whole council would be in agreement to approving the whole plan, including these positions, provided we have a role in the details of their creation, then we have 1 motion and we don't need 3.
Yeah, that
Does
would
that
be
make
fine if you
sense?
want to add the wording, Sarah, to cover that.
Because I'm hopeful that we're not going to have a situation where a council member would vote yes to the plan and no to a position, and just make the language that way. And then we have one motion and then we vote once.
Okay, I'm not the best writer. Okay, so if anyone wants to throw in the language about the LSCs, what you're looking for, Cassie, in the chat, then I can make the motion. But it would basically be that we're approving the whole school safety plan as presented by the whole school safety committee this evening, which includes two additional positions. I'm just doing this on the fly. 2 additional positions. I'll read the whole thing. This is just 2 additional positions. 1 security office, security guard. What is their title?
Security officer.
Security team, yeah.
Security team member, right? And 1 SEL position, for lack of a better term at this point. And then Cassie, what wording should I add?
I think basically for both positions, I would recommend actually a committee member from the health and safety and a committee member from the equity, because I think they have the most, been thinking about these things in detail. So for both positions, a member of the health and safety committee and a member of the LSC equity committee will participate in creating the job description, in the review of resumes for applicants, and in the interview process.
Description.
I ask, would that be for the SEL position or also for the
Oh, good
security
point.
officer position?
I think that it's crucial for the SEL position. Probably the interview process, it might be nice for the job security position, because I think, the description that Daniel gave of the role of security officers, that is sort of key to this. And I'm less loath to support it if we know it's someone who really has that sort of relationship with students, rather than a very security focused relationship, because it's really the relationships that matter in actually keeping students safe in our schools. So I would be happy to see all of that, because this is really supposed to be a very, it's an integrated plan. So, Mr. Mitchell?
Clarification.
Yeah, would it be helpful if, not at this time, but I write up our process for selection of security? Because when we look at resumes, as part of the process, we are looking at what levels of interaction they've had with students previously, because that is key, that is important, very important component. So as we're vetting, going through that process, those are key things that are already looking for. So would it behoove the council if we write up kind of, I guess, our process in terms of hiring a security team member? And if they're okay with the process, they will trust us to do it ourselves, or do they still want to be a part of the process?
I mean, I think especially because we're adding this position as part of this overall safety plan that's really talking about SEL and centering students is important. And I just think we can use the same position process for both positions. And I think it's not something that we're necessarily going to say we want all the time or something, but I think for this it makes sense. And I think it sort of just sets the tone for this role, that it's an integral part of something that the LSC thought and the whole school safety committee came together and figured out.
And just to clarify, because I was typing, it was to participate in creating the job description, reviewing the resumes, and participating in the interview process. Were those the 3 items?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
So
those 2 committees can just decide amongst themselves who to send for each of those.
What we can do is create an interview team for each of the 2 positions, integrating people from those 2 committees as well, and from the rest of the staff as well.
Okay, so I am ready to read the motion if you guys are ready. Mr. Mitchell's ready. Okay. Okay, I make a motion to approve the whole school safety plan as presented by the whole school safety committee this evening, which includes 2 additional positions, 1 security team member and 1 SEL position. For both positions, a committee member from the LSC Health and Safety Committee and a member of the LSC Equity Committee will participate in creating the job description, reviewing the resumes, and participating in the interview process.
I second.
Okay. Do a roll call. Dun, dun, dun. Sorry. Andrade,
Yes.
Bugs,
Yes.
Serna Prado,
Yes.
Cresswell,
Yes.
Hillbrands,
Yay.
Land,
Yes.
Ma, yes. Menjivar.
I'd like to offer a topper motion. So in addition to what you explained for the equity,
Oh, no, yeah, Dr. Powers.
We're in voting procedure. We really should not be modifying the motion at this particular time.
Yeah, otherwise we have to start over, which is, you can vote no or abstain.
well, I will vote yes.
Okay. Powers,
Yes.
Zen.
Yes.
Okay. Motion carries.
Reto, is your motion specific to like the content of the plan, or is it a separate motion that you can make that we can hold a separate vote on related to the equity stuff?
I was just gonna, so my motion would have been to have the LSC, the LSC approve those 2 positions, because right now it's just the equity member, a member from the equity committee and a member of the health and safety participating in that, and then making a motion for the team, the hiring team, to make that recommendation to the LSC for the LSC to review and approve.
Dr. Powers?
Yes, the final decision on any hiring is with the leadership team of the school, not with the LSC. The LSC will have input through the interview process and the screening process, and also the process in creating the job description, but final decisions have to be with the principal and other members of the leadership team.
Yeah, I think we can like do a vote that like, I mean, it would be a non-binding vote basically if we were to do a vote like that, to like pass our recommendation on. So.
Cassie, Madam Chair, I withdraw my motion. I think it's fine.
Okay. Okay, so it's 8. We can take a 5-minute break, and then we can hear the whatever information there's available currently on MFT and OST funds.
Let's do Raquel's public comment before break.
Thank you. Yes. Raquel, we skipped public participation earlier, and we are happy to have it now. So thanks for coming, and go ahead and take the floor.
Yeah, I always appreciate attending meetings and learning what's going on at the school. I am just not familiar with your meeting norms. I don't know if you post them at the beginning of the meeting or if you have them. But I just feel a little silly now saying anything since my questions were relevant to what you all already discussed and voted on. So I'm just gonna say thank you for your time, and I will just continue listening.
Yep, sorry, you missed the public participation part. Like, so we normally have it at the beginning, and we hear from everyone who signed up, and we have it at the beginning because we expect people want to weigh in on what's being voted on. So that, sorry you weren't there for that window, and I'm glad you're here. We do a second participation at the end to hear from people. So if you have comments that are relevant, this is the moment. But so sorry, we have norms, and one of them is ouch, and so I would say ouch for that, because I'm sorry that if we've No, oops, for that, to have not gotten your input in a timely way for that vote. So I think we will take our 5-minute break now, and then we'll do our last 3 agenda items. And there are a lot of check-off requisitions, so keep that in mind, everyone. Okay, thank you, Mr. Mitchell, and it's been super helpful to have you here. So thanks. And
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Okay, so I will call us back to order. And Sarah, do you want to do the roll?
I do.
Seven here.
I'm looking for a couple more pictures here, but maybe people are staying off camera. Andrade? Not
Here.
yet. Oh, hi. Okay. Bugs?
Present.
Serna, oh, she left. Serta Prado. Cresswell.
Here.
Hillbrands.
Here.
Land. There she's out. Ma is here. Menjivar. Menjivar. Okay, Powers.
Here.
Zen.
Here.
5, 6, 7. Okay, we have quorum. I cannot hear Deborah. Sorry, Deborah. It's past life. Deborah.
I left the comma out. That was, I meant, can you hear? Deborah.
Oh, okay. Deborah's here and Benjavar. All right, he's taking a longer break. All right, we have quorum. Let's go.
Okay, so the CPS is now kind of calling these additional discretionary funds MFT dollars, and then there's also the out of school time, which are also sort of part of MFT dollars. So it's kind of a big mishmash. I seem to think we should know what we're getting in dollars, at least have the numbers, even if we don't know yet what we're spending them on. So if you have an update on that, like, did we get a document from central office that said we have these dollars and et cetera? Dr. Powers, go ahead.
The only thing we have concrete dollar figures on are the ADF funds, which came as part of our budget. And that is, again, I use a round figure, $250,000. And then the OST funds, which is about $150,000. Again, these are within a few $1,000. And those are for specific earmarked areas. ADF primarily for social emotional learning and related needs, and the OST is for after out of school time, and we're developing planning for that as well. With regard to MFT, my understanding at this point is that MFT is an overall plan of action. I'm not sure if any additional funds are coming from that. If so, we have not seen them yet. They have not come into our budget area yet. So we're hoping to see more about that in the coming weeks.
No, I think they're just like sort of calling the ADF and the OST, like
I think you're right.
those are the MFT dollars.
The MFT is a planning mechanism moving forward together. And that's why, as Mr. Mitchell related earlier, that's why we have a template that has been provided, and that's what we're working on right now. We'll present as a draft next week, and then hopefully have everything finalized by mid-month, I believe the 16th.
And so will the LSC, should we expect to see the draft, or will you have something for us on August or at the budget meeting next week, the budget committee meeting?
At this point, I do not know. Because we're presenting it as a draft, we would rather just see what feedback we get from CPS before we move forward, and then we can present that. I'm not sure if we're going to have that ready for the August regular meeting, but you know, sometime soon thereafter.
Okay, so do you have additional questions? Because I think you do have a budget committee meeting next week, right?
Yeah, I just had, sorry, okay, I have two specific questions, and I think it's good for the whole council to know, which is, we talked about it at the last meeting, but how are we paying for that AP that we didn't, that we could not pay out of 115 funds? And the second question was relating to the freshman and sophomore connection and why we didn't utilize the funds provided by CPS for that. So if you could answer those two questions.
Take the second question first. The reason we did not utilize CPS funds for that, and we have not done so, is that it really restricts us in what we do and how we do it, and also calls into issues involving hiring of people to participate, staff members, for example. We have from the very beginning utilized, and also the funds tend to be a relatively small amount of money, at least they were prior to this year. We've instead relied on our own resources and the fundraising by FOJ, so we can create plans that are tailored to our school rather than a one-size-fits-all freshman connection. We were pioneers on freshman connection. Nobody was even calling it that when we started doing it. They just had, people typically had a 2-day orientation or a 1-day orientation. So we created the program. It's grown and constricted and grown again. And hopefully we will be able to reestablish it in its full 2-week model next year. But again, what CPS provides in terms of both curriculum and other requirements does not meet the needs of our school, and the amount of money involved is truly not worth the difficulties.
I think we don't have to talk about that right now. I'd love to look at that more. I'd love to see what that number was, only because I have talked to friends whose students were involved, and especially a friend of mine who's a counselor saying, "Oh, I didn't see Joe's on the list. What are you guys doing?" The one offered by CPS is a 2-week program as opposed to 1 week. It does involve some actually some math and reading, like some kind of like making sure you're on the right track. And I don't know if that's what you mean by not being appropriate for the school. So let's talk about that more. I hate to not use resources that are provided by the district. And then I don't, Cassie, do you remember, was it 23,000 that FOJ's was spending on just sophomore connection? I mean, we got the fundraising ask email. I could just Google it, but I mean, I had a friend reach out to me who was like, "Oh, I just can't afford this right now. You know, what if I can't donate my $250?" I said, you don't need to do that.
It's strictly voluntary.
Strictly voluntary.
Yeah,
okay, so I think we should explore that more. I never want to turn down money, even if it could augment what you already are doing. I don't know what the restrictions are, so let's just leave it at that.
I think it's a very specific to this year and specific to COVID recovery that CPS was offering to cover basically a 4-week program for schools, and they could use your own teachers, and they like if you needed to additionally hire because your own teaching staff wasn't available, then you could also do that. So it was a pretty comprehensive program from what I understood. So
and what was the first question again you had, Sarah? Forgive me for
yeah,
what that was.
How are we paying the AP that was cut from 115 funds?
Oh, okay. That's going to come out of the ADF funds for the coming year, and then following that, we will have probably continue. In fact, I'm sure we will have to fund an assistant principal position out of 124 funds, our internal accounts. Out of internal accounts, I should say, and which is what we have been doing for a number of years. So that's what we'll be doing for the short term, and then for the long term, it will be out of internal accounts.
But we already have one that we fund out of internal accounts. So now we're going to fund 2 this year out of internal accounts?
No, we'll fund one out of internal accounts, and another will be funded out of the ADF funds.
For this year, but then for next year?
Coming year. For the following year, depending on what we're able to do with regard to budget, we don't know what our budget situation is going to be. Hopefully, we will be able to cover all four of our positions, either through the budget or a combination of budget and internal accounts.
I read through the moving forward together guidelines, and unless you read them differently, I just didn't feel that you could cover administrative positions. So I don't know if you're
I had received when the ADF funds were originally rolled out, I specifically asked, can that be used to designate a current staff member who's an administrator to serve in that SEL related capacity? And the answer was yes.
Okay, I just know that PPLC was very vocal of making sure it was the right person, and they didn't feel like the current APs had the SEL background that was required. So I don't know, you know, like,
They are entitled to their opinion.
yeah, it's gonna be fun.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think we will actually be voting on that though, right? Like, did we not take any votes on the use of the ADF funds?
No.
So ADF funds are completely controlled by the school, and the LSC has no say in how ADF funds are allocated. Is that?
That's part of, it's right now, it's part of the budget, and the budget's already been approved.
Yeah, I think we should get some more clarification on that, but
Right
for
ahead.
now.
Be part of the discussion at
Okay.
I think there's also some funds for back to school activities, so hopefully that can also be discussed. I think those are just sort of like really unconstrained, well, not really unconstrained, but 115 funds for like basically welcoming kids back to school activities. And I think so hopefully that could be on the budget committee discussion list as well, since school is starting in 5 weeks. I think that's all for item 6. So for item 7, make sure I'm not ignoring the hands. So I put together slides. I think Sarah's going to check on that question, Roberto, of the cost of freshman and sophomore orientation. Sarah, do you want to share the slides that I have linked? So we're continuing to get questions, especially from teachers or staff going to Mr. Voigt to ask about spending and constraints on that. And we've also had several discussions about fundraising and also grants and gifts and donations and the procedures around this. So I wanted to put it together a document that will make all of this very clear. It's located in a bunch of different places basically in CPS materials. So sort of the 2 key documents are the LSC resource guide. So I hope that all the LSC members are familiar with that at this point, and you've done your training. And so especially the training module on internal accounts and fundraising is relevant. And then there is the internal accounts, or the insider's guide to internal accounts. And so that is also very thorough in its discussion of these items. So I just wanted to go over, this is a very long presentation. You'll see it as 26 slides. I'm not going to go into detail on all of them, but I also, as part of our next LSC email that goes out, we can send this. And I will encourage Mr. Voigt to send it to staff, or Dr. Powers, you could take that on yourself, because even though the policy for approving internal accounts expenditures has been in place now for 6 months, it seems like there's still a lack of clarity on that. And in addition, there is perpetually, it seems, fundraising going on that doesn't fall into this. And so I'm actually, if you want to go to slide 25, I will spoiler alert why this matters. So it's really important for sort of 3 main things. For transparency, if we don't track fundraising and gifts and grants and all our spending, we don't know how the school is allocating resources. So internal accounts are actually a relatively small part of our budget. The very biggest part is the 115 funds that pay almost all for staff and faculty, but it's also the part that there's sort of the most flexibility and discretion in spending. And so it's important to know where it's going and where it's coming in from as well. And so part of that, the reason for that transparency and why it's needed is that we need to, if we're fundraising and spending, are we actually doing that in a way that is in accordance with what we're trying to achieve as a school in terms of school improvement? And that's sort of a key part of what the LSC has oversight over. It's a key part of the principal's job is the continuous improvement work plan and what we're doing. And so, you know, if everyone's sort of individually fundraising and we don't know what's happening and those fundraisers are not coming to the LSC to get approval, then there's actually no complete picture of what we're asking students to fundraise on. We're not giving parents a complete picture of what we're asking your Friends of Jones donations to go to. And so we really don't have an idea what we're doing and accomplishing. So that's a really important part of that. In addition, if you're making donations and you're contributing to fundraisers, are those being spent in the way the donors intended? If we aren't tracking any of that, there actually is no way to know. And finally, but definitely not lastly, equity. Are we allocating resources equitably? If we don't really know what money is coming in and where it's going, we don't actually know whether equity is being achieved. So these are all sort of really key reasons that we need to pay attention here. So I think sort of like the kind of the key slides here for tonight are slides 5. So I really recommend that people look at this insider's guide if you haven't before, and you're sort of new to the school fundraising. So this just covers what LSC governance is. And so that includes approving fundraisers. Not all fundraisers have to come to the LSC, but a fair amount do. Approving uses of the facilities by non-school affiliated groups. That's something that LSC should be approving. Internal accounts, receipts and expenditures, and in particular purchases over $2,500. Written contracts that are under 10,000. The school, the LSC and the principal together have pretty much the role in approving those, with some exceptions that have to go higher up than us. And then also reviewing audit parts and then reviewing the internal accounts documents. So a lot of number 7 is taking place in the budget committee. So basically, if you want to go to the next slide, Sarah, sort of the really quick thing that everyone should know is that essentially all fundraising that's benefiting the school or a school activity requires a written fundraising proposal and approval. So the first stop for that is the principal. I think Dr. Powers put that in the chat. Yes, so pretty much there's a little chart that shows later kind of the breakdown of the proposal approvals, and really the principal has to approve all the different kinds of fundraisers. In some cases, the LSC approval is required, and in some cases, central office. So the Insider's Guide has a good chart as well, which I've just included in these slides. In addition, any kind of gifts and grants and donations, whether those are dollars or they are objects or services, those need to be reported. And the helpful thing for the LSC is that then there's a record and we know what is coming in. And especially in the case when what's coming in is not dollars, then it's hard to track. So gifts of stuff or services, those should all be going through there. So when the Friends of Jones provides a grant and fulfills that way we'll know, like, oh, they gave this grant blah to the debate team for a bus. And that's the sort of way to be able to keep track of those things, even though they aren't dollars that are flowing through the internal accounts. So I think, do you want to go to slide 8? Some other sort of basic principles under the fundraising is that the idea is that fundraising should be benefiting the students at the time, and you should be using those within the same year funds were raised. This doesn't always happen, but that should be the goal. And actually CPS's recommendation is that you actually do not carry over large balances in your internal accounts. And so that is something for us to keep in mind as an LSC as well. As I mentioned sort of at the end, with respect to equity, when we're distributing these funds that are raised, we want to make sure that gender equity and non-discrimination policies and laws and principles are being followed. There's pretty specific detailed guidelines for things like crowd funding. That I think is something that is, easier to just set up and do, and as opposed to something where you're like selling popcorn at school, right? And so that there's details in the insider's guide on how it should run, and those should also be coming to the school with a written proposal. And CPS has actually quite a detailed description of the oversight that those crowdfunding proposals should be, what should be happening with those. So I think that's something that should probably needs to be made clear to especially advisors of student activities, because I think that's kind of where that information is falling into a gap and not being communicated. So the LSC resource guide goes into a lot of detail about different categories of fundraising. Sort of the main, they have these 6 detailed ones. A really major characteristic, what determines who covers things is whether there's actual students involved. And anything with students involved pretty much falls under category 1. So if students are spending money or collecting money and selling things, there's a lot of constraints on that. So that is slide 11, if you want to show people that one, Sarah. Yes, and so this is a very clear case of where fundraising should benefit the student body in the same year that the funds are being collected. And there's distinctions between continuous fundraisers and one-time fundraisers. Continuous fundraisers aren't supposed to be run by external organizations. They can assist, but they shouldn't actually be the ones taking in the money and managing the inventory. And that's very clear in the Insider's Guide as well. These other categories, if you want to go on to the next slide, Sarah, are more detailed. So this category 2 splits between things like PTOs that aren't really necessarily officially registered out in the world as nonprofits versus ones that are, and how fundraising should be split between them. I think the category that probably applies most to, say, a general Friends of Jones fundraiser is really category 4. And so I think that is all pretty much in the LSC resource guide. And so I would point people there to look at those details. And basically, these should still be coming initially through the school. That isn't saying that the school or the LSC or the principal says, if you're raising funds externally, we're going to tell you how you should use those. But if it's for the benefit of the school, then the school should approve that it's happening, especially when it's being done in the name of the school. And so it's really partly about intellectual property, and the CPS Law Department can answer any questions that we have about this going forward. Number 5 is very specific. That's the next slide. So if students want to raise money for some other cause, that's basically that case. And then category 6, the LSC itself can actually fundraise some. So especially if we want to do activities ourselves. So if we want to do some training for LSC members, we can raise funds and then use it for that. And we can actually also raise some funds to put into internal accounts for the use of the school, but it's got a pretty tight limit. Yeah, so the next slide, 17, basically sums it up. You've got to do a proposal, and then after you raise your funds, you have to complete a report. If it's a continuous fundraiser, you might just do a report twice a year, but that and those funds have to be turned over to internal accounts. Slide 18 is about grants and donations. So, and that includes donations of stuff in kind. The school basically has to put a report in through Oracle that we've received something, and then there's a record of it. So the donator should be handing over a letter saying, here's what we're giving you. And then it's basically the job of the school to report that to the district. On here, there is sort of like a weird case. If you have an external org and they want to raise money, they could actually deposit it in the school account and then buy the stuff, use that money to buy something, and then donate that actual thing. And so in that case, it's sort of just the school accounts are kind of holding that money. But in general, if your external orgs have their own bank accounts, you don't really have to do something like that. So slide 19 has the details on who has to approve what. And that's also from the Insider's Guide. So then moving on to spending, sort of the really quick top line stuff there is that spending requires the approval of the principal, and if it's over $2,500, it's going to require the approval of the LSC. And because we normally only meet once a month, or you can only count on us to be meeting regularly, purchases should be planned with sufficient advance timing. And so, there's some other constraints, like you can only be using CPS approved vendors, and even if something is free, it might actually be the case that you need approval to use it in the case that student data is involved. So next slide. Yeah, so I think, this is just sort of going over where money in your internal accounts comes from, and basically that same recommendation that we should really be using our internal accounts to support the current school year. The next slide is about contracts, and basically under $10,000, it's sort of like school level stuff. Over $10,000, really the district needs to get involved. And for things over $25,000, if that's not something that has a district level contract, then we're pretty much out of luck in terms of using that vendor. So that matters more for very big purchases. These next two slides are mostly relevant, I think, for teachers and staff, and just highlighting the LSC approval in the process. And basically, if there's questions on this stuff, they go to Mr. Voigt, and Mr. Voigt gives the details on how this process works at Jones and what forms have to be filled out. And there's actually, many of them. And so that is sort of the summing up of all of this. If you want to go to the last slide, the references, some of this is covered in the school code. Some of this is from this Insider's Guide, and some of it is also just board policies. So I kind of have a link to all of those there. And I think as we have questions about, especially like these check requisitions, and as we're figuring out how to utilize internal accounts, these are very good references for that. And as we're discussing what the procedures should be for fundraising and gift acceptance, that's all in great detail there. And there's various central office departments that can answer questions about these things, procurement or the CFO, controller kind of stuff. So this is partly for us as the LSC, so we know sort of like what our duties are covering, and what our governance covers. But it's also something I want to share with the school community, because I think there's just a general lack of clarity around these things, and the importance of them. So that is what I have on this. And yeah, it's a lot. So if you haven't digested this stuff before, you know, it is just going to be sitting on the internet for you to read. Thanks. Go ahead, Dr. Powers.
Yes, I want to, first of all, thank you very much. This is a very good, clear, and sequential summary here. It's especially important to note, too, that we have had, because of the pandemic and because of changes in crowdsourcing, I guess you might say, something that really was not even on the horizon just a few years ago. That's why some of those fundraising efforts got underway by students for their teams, for example, or their clubs, without any knowledge on our part. And then by the time we found out what was going on, they were already underway. So we've already communicated that with our faculty and staff so that all sponsors are aware of those limitations and what the proper guidelines are. And then we will also make that a significant part of our faculty handbook and the 0-week meetings that we have. We try very hard not to let something go off like that on its own, and also to really examine each one to find out if it is something that is really worthwhile. There are some fundraising companies that really don't provide, they provide a lot of product and not a whole lot of profit. So we're often, cautioning organizations to avoid some of those things or head them in a different direction, that type of thing. And, again, selling sausages and Christmas trees and whatever, that kind of thing. This is excellent, and I think it'll be very helpful to help people understand what can be done, how it can be done, and again, especially to know when it needs to be gotten into us in time for the LSC to give approval for anything, and not to start the project prior to that.
Yeah, I think the message people should take away from this is like, not that you can't do things, just that there's, various things put into place to make sure that, exactly, like kids aren't getting exploited by bad wrapping paper companies. And also that, if you're donating money and you're like, oh, I thought I was going to donate this money for, instruments, and it turns out that's not where this goes. And, people, I think that just is generally a principle of giving and tracking that stuff. And
I have a carton of T-shirts in my basement, left over from a fundraiser sometime in the late 1980s. Nobody wanted to buy them. So we really try to work with the kids to make sure they're not obligating to buy product.
Yeah, there's a lot of controls in that. Like, and with the crowd fundraisers, that's also one of the things. Like, you have to make sure that you're not doing sort of a Kickstarter thing where, like, if you put the money in, it might go to somewhere else. I think my connection is bad.
Practical, however, and they can back.
Oh, I'm like half frozen, you guys.
I didn't get anything you said. See, there was a big problem there.
Yeah, I'm like, I just think I'm like, glitch. Okay, basically the take home is like, everyone go home and read this in your free time. Very enjoyable. Read the references and use it to point people to it when they have questions. So that is the point of that document. So speaking of expenditures, we have approval of items over $2,500, and quite a few of them. Sadly, Mr. Voigt is not available tonight, so we tried to anticipate some questions, or Sarah did. I put some of them in that update document. And so, Sarah, do you want to just guide us through this list and
Sure.
what's straightforward and what is not so straightforward?
Yeah, unless you need me to share it, I'll just read it. There's two from the ATI, which is the, hold on, give me 1 second. Okay, here we go. Perfect. Sorry. There's 2 from ATI for, one is for spring 2021 training services, one is for winter. And I think those are, it's part of a contract. I'm sorry, that's a $25,000 school year. Is that right, Cassie? All of a sudden I was like, is it school year or is it?
It's kind of school year.
It's kind of school year. So this is a contract we have with ATI. And so this is what we owe them. BSN Sports, this is girls basketball apparel. And the lead time on sports apparel is crazy right now. So the earphones, Miss Trosh clarified that even though that said something about world language earphones on the check rec, it's actually just they're headphones with a mic for every student. And they'll get one when they get their Chromebooks. And if they lose them, then they'll pay for them. There is gym uniforms, and that's 400 uniforms, so I'm assuming that's for freshmen. And I'm guessing that we bought the sophomores, even though they never got it last year, so we'll hand those out. Okay, and there is the Nearpod licensing. That was part of our software budgeting. That's $4,995. And there's $23,000 for the auditorium renovation. And I have a little question on that. But then there's the copier supplemental maintenance contract for $5,300, $3,750, and then the school year books for about $29,000. My question was, and I'd like Dr. Powers to talk about the North Auditorium renovation, and then just a little background on this, the copier contract. If it says supplemental maintenance, just wondering if like this is in addition to a contract we already have. Those are my questions.
First of all, with regard to the renovations in the North Auditorium, this has to do with expanding the stage area. Several years ago, I guess it's now been going on now 4 years ago, we moved the orchestra program to the North Auditorium because we had too many sections of instrumental music, band, and orchestra for the room that we have on the second floor, or the third floor rather, in the south building. And there was not enough room for all the instruments, the storage, and so forth. So at the request of our orchestra teacher, Mrs. Bassa, we relocated the orchestra to the stage in the North Auditorium. But because the orchestra program has grown and gotten larger and larger in terms of the number of students, and we're now up to 3 sections of orchestra at various levels, the stage is a little bit restrictive. It's not a large stage. It's not nearly as large as the one in the South Auditorium or South building. We have already done some changes to the wings area in terms of storage to provide a little bit more space on the stage proper for the orchestra to be seated and practice. But what we need is to extend the stage outward several feet, and also then a complete recovering of the stage, so there's an uninterrupted surface there. The stage is quite old. It goes back to the original construction of the D building, which is 1966, I think, 1967. And various layers have been laid over that stage since that time. But it's now time to resurface that and then extend it out in a way that is sturdy and permanent. And there's plenty of room for it because there's a large space in front of the stage before you get to the first rows of seats. So that will be a permanent expansion and will enable us not only to more effectively have our orchestra program in there, and Mrs. Bassa, of course, has done tremendously wonderful work with our orchestra. It will also enhance the value of the North Auditorium for rental purposes and for other usage. In other words, it'll be much more readily usable for performances and recitals, things of that sort. And Troy and I, we've been talking about a lot of these changes for years. We still have some additional things we want to do projecting out in terms of technology, sound, and lighting, because really not a whole lot had been done in the previous 50 plus years in that area. It's one of the few areas that had not been fully renovated in the North Campus building. We renovated the seating several years back, and that's a nice improvement, tremendously so. But now we have other technical things to deal with. But the first order of business is the stage itself.
And then, thank you. Can you clarify, like, if it's over 10,000, do we need to get three bids for this?
We have to. I'm not sure about the bids, but we do have to get CPS approval. It has to be a vendor, and if we're required to get additional bids, we certainly can do so. We wanted to start with a quote that gave us a ballpark figure of what kind of cost we were talking about, and it's too big a project to be done in-house.
Right.
Our in-house people can do a number of renovations and things like that, but this is too large for that.
What's the timeline?
We want to get it done before the start of school, if at all possible. If we cannot, it's going to cause some disruption, but we can work around that.
My other question was about the copier
The
contract.
copier, yeah. I'm not absolutely sure. We have a copier maintenance contract, and Troy, I think Troy probably knows a little bit more about this than I do.
We do have an existing contract where we outright bought the large copier, and this is an ongoing yearly maintenance agreement where they would come out, and our printers and copiers break down weekly. So I believe this would cover that maintenance. And I didn't read the full PO, but I'm pretty sure that it also includes toner.
Oh, Roberto, do you want to go ahead? Oops, Roberto?
Can you hear me?
Yep, now we can.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Sorry. Let's see. So I had a question regarding the theater stage expansion, and a couple questions on this. One, is there a reason why the CPS facilities department isn't covering the cost? And the second question I have is relating to whether the stage is compliant with the American with Disabilities Act of 1990, also known as the ADA. And the reason I bring this up is because in May of this year, I attended the CPS capital planning, and they had 4 priorities. At least in general, they had 4 priorities. One was prioritizing neighborhood schools that had a significant needs, and then also the second priority was for a full day pre-K kindergarten expansion and expansion on technology. And then the third was a restroom modernization. And then finally, the fourth was accessibility, or the ADA accessibility. And that this is the CPS's long-term project to assess every school to ensure that they are ADA accessible and compliant. So I just want to make sure that this expansion is being inclusive, and that the theater at this point is ADA compliant, and that our diverse learners or students with a disability have access to that stage.
On the first question about CPS not covering, CPS generally will, again, the maintenance related portions of it, will take care of repairs and replacing such things as the chillers and other things that are part of the mechanicals of the school, replacing windows that are broken, any one of a number of things like that. So generally speaking, they will cover that. This is an elective action we're taking because we need the space. With regard to ADA accessibility, the auditorium is accessible, meaning we have an elevator outside where somebody can come from ground level into the building at ground level, come to the second floor, and then come directly into the auditorium. And so as a result, we have that covered. This expansion really is just adding like 3 feet to the front of the stage is what it comes down to, and a more even surface for the overall stage. We'd also more recently added storage capabilities in the wings there, and we did that separately.
So Dr. Parks, just to clarify, the theater itself, students with disabilities can access the theater, but it sounds like they wouldn't be able to access the stage and participate either in orchestra or some other theater arts program. Is that correct?
If we have a need, we will address the need. And we have done that in the past. So we've had students, for example, when we were previously using that auditorium for a lot of performance type of things, we had students that we made sure they had access to the stage. Other than that, it's the only people accessing the stage are the actual performers in the orchestra and any other programs. For programs outside of school time that are not school related, meaning outside organizations and so forth, we also pass muster on that as well.
Any other questions from council members? I have a question on this. It seems like this is like a pretty, you guys have been talking about this internally for a long time. It seems like a pretty big expense not to have popped up in the budget in this spring, especially since we have a lot of questions about what internal accounts has to cover this year and what reserves we have because of questions about when rentals will recover. And so I'm just wondering about that. Like $23,000 is a big expenditure to just not have listed in the spring budget, especially since we were just being told that we've already passed the budget and we can't be allocating stuff. So I'm just wondering about that.
This came up primarily later in the spring as we started getting our enrollment numbers and seeing just exactly how many students we had enrolled in the orchestra program. And so it was not something we had anticipated as part of the budget process back in March and April. This came up a little bit later, and that's one reason why we're, first of all, looking to determine just exactly what the scope of it would need to be, and then secondly, what our resources were available to us. At this point, we are planning to fund this out of funds that are still remaining in our rental accounts.
So if we're getting other bids, should we be, are we approving a contract? Is that what we're being asked to approve tonight with Peerport, or a check? I'm not comfortable writing out signing a check for $23,000 if we haven't gotten our 3 bids yet, even though this is pretty urgent given that school is starting in 5 weeks. So that, and especially because it wasn't in the budget, so it's, until we see some more detail on what we're going to need to use the internal accounts for and what we're need, reserve rental income, and I'd like to at least have a budget committee before approving this one. The other one seemed pretty straightforward, and they're from various things and they're designated for those, but this is sort of an unexpected cost, and it was it seems like it's probably something the school community would want, but I mean, knowing where to prioritize it right now, I think is very difficult.
Well, I can say that, as I mentioned before, this is, an important priority from the point of view of, having enough space for the students to actually perform. And then it has the ancillary benefits of making the whole auditorium much more usable, I guess you might say, and the stage more usable. I did notice that Mr. Menjivar put in the in the chat there information regarding the science lab and STEM related initiatives. And we do have 2 science labs that are under major renovation paid for by CPS. And those will be ready by the time school starts, just as an aside. But, you know, in this particular situation, this is a company that CPS has approved. We have dealt with them before. We will have a contract with them that has to be approved by CPS. And before we can move forward, at this point, what we're asking for is simply approval of the funds to make possible going forward with this.
Go ahead, Deborah.
As I'm sitting here listening to this, where we're not sure if we need other bids, and we're not sure if we're going to have a contract, I'm a little uncomfortable doing a check approval when it's a little premature. I have to agree with what Cassie's saying, that maybe we need to really understand what our governance is on this project before we can actually hold a vote on it. I don't think anybody's saying we shouldn't do the work, but if we're not sure, yes, we have a vendor, but if we're not sure if this is the only vendor we have to look at, how are we going to approve the expense tonight? I feel like we're rushing to try and finish something, but we haven't finished the homework yet.
Well, I'll have to check with the engineer and with Mr. Voigt when he gets back. Normally speaking, when we have a project like this, we do request multiple bids. This is probably the bid that was recommended by the engineer, chief engineer, Dan Casasato, because of the nature of the work and what they're offering and so forth. But we can certainly check on that prior to the budget meeting on Monday. However, then that puts us potentially further behind in getting this project completed. It probably is going to be tight, more than tight to begin with. So we were hoping to move this along, but I understand what you're saying there, and we'll do what we can to provide the necessary information by the time of the budget meeting on Monday. If you wish to wait until the next regular scheduled meeting to approve this, it will create some difficulties for us, but you know, we've dealt with difficulties before.
Yeah, especially because I think we're still in virtual meeting mode for, you know, the next month or something. If we need to get both people together to vote, to make a quorum to do an emergency meeting, that would be possible. My other concern is just that, like, are there other discretionary renovation projects that have been discussed and under consideration? And if there's a bigger picture, then we know where this falls. And like, presumably you're picking the highest priority, most urgent thing. But it's very hard for us to evaluate what we're weighing that against. And especially without a bigger picture of what we're asking ADF funds to cover. You know, we're covering more positions than it seems like Jones has covered in the past with you know, internal accounts. And I think there's just a very complex picture that, yeah, and I think Roberta's question about ADA compliance is important, because I think the CPS is basically required, if you're doing a major renovation of something, it needs to be compliant. And so if the stage isn't accessible, like wheelchair accessible, that is probably like post renovation, that's probably an issue. So I think I'm pretty comfortable with the other check requisitions tonight, but this I'd rather not vote down and rather just postpone.
I think that is fine. With regard to what you said earlier in terms of prioritizing or other renovation projects for the North Auditorium, in fact, for that building, which includes the lobby areas, restrooms, and so forth, we have been doing long-term planning in terms of, as I mentioned before, lighting, flooring in the lobby area, even the creation of student gathering areas in the lobby, that type of thing. But again, the funds just haven't been available for us yet, so we've been trying to prioritize those as we're going along. We've improved the lighting to a degree in the auditorium. using in-house resources and our engineering team and so forth. But more needs to be done to bring it up to a standard where it'll be a more desirable facility and a more usable facility. But those are things that are going to be moving forward in the future.
Yeah, so knowing where this fits into a variety of things that are being considered, I think would help. And especially when it's coming out of internal accounts and we have all these questions about rentals, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if you're ready, if all questions have been exhausted, I will make my giant motion. And yeah, should we go? Okay, I make a motion to approve the following check requisitions. $8,333.34 in 2 payments to ATI for spring 2021 and winter 2020/2021 services. $3,384 for girls basketball apparel paid to BSN Sports. $5,710.50 to CDW for earphones with mics. $5,663.75 to Graphic Edge for PE uniforms, quantity 400. $4,995 for Nearpod for the 2021-2022 school licensing for 2,000 students. $5,337.50 to RICO for supplemental maintenance contract renewal for copies through managed print services, and $29,864 to Walsworth for the 2021-2022 school yearbooks. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Andrade.
Yay.
Bugs.
Yes.
Cresswell.
Yes.
Hillbrands.
Yay.
Land.
Yes.
Ma. Yes. Menjivar.
Yay.
Powers.
Yes.
Zen.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries.
Okay, I think that is the end of our agenda. And so seeing no further business, we can adjourn for the night. The budget committee meeting is Monday. Do you have a time for that one, Sarah?
We're doing it in the morning. We're doing it at 9 a.m.
And then I don't know the other committee chairs. I think, watch for alerts from them if they're starting up committee meetings for August. And our next regular meeting is August 10th. Raquel, do you want to, not really chairing because we've adjourned, but go ahead.
I just had a question if the budget committee meetings were public.
Yeah, so all LSC committee meetings are also, because they're committees of the public body, so those are also open meetings and covered under the Open Meetings Act. Yeah, so you can find.
So then where could that information be found if parents wanted to join?
We are having it posted just like the, like on the news thing on the website. They're posted there, and then we put them on the LSC's Facebook page and the LSC's Instagram page. So basically check those 3 things, whichever route is your favorite.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.